Kimi Räikkönen on Fisichella, Japan 2005. Starting off our list with one of the greatest overtakes this sport has ever seen, Kimi Räikkönen was in second place in the 2005 Japanese GP, having fought his way up from 17th on the grid and pulled off an incredible overtake to steal the win from Fisichella on the very last lap of the race.
He'll have to go defensive down the inside, he'll have to go tighter than that. Oh, and they nearly touched. Can Räikkönen sweep in? Yes, he can. Brilliant.
What a brilliant move! Side by side down the straight. Grand Prix racing at its absolute finest.
Throughout F1 history, safety standards have been improving, and thankfully so, because if these cars weren't as strong, we're not sure these two drivers would have survived this outrageous crash. During the 2002 Austrian Grand Prix, drivers Nick Heidfeld and Takuma Sato had one of the biggest coming-togethers ever seen in Formula 1. Austria's Red Bull Ring has a habit of producing big smashes thanks to several big braking zones, and on lap 1 of the 2002 visit, this dramatic collision at turn 3 shook the racing world. As Nick Heidfeld approached the corner, he hit the brakes and suddenly found his car to be completely out of control. He veered towards the apex and went headfirst into the pack of cars who were turning into the corner and smashed straight into the side of Takuma Sato at full speed. Sato had no warning that he was about to be hit and took the full force of the impact of Heidberg's Sauber, which was traveling at astronomical speed.
Heidfeld battles for fifth, but the German is too eager on the brakes and the repercussions are horrific. That sends shockwaves down the pit lane.
I saw that it was right in front of me. Good shot.
Somehow, both drivers managed to escape this truly shocking crash without injury.
Now, we all know that Formula 1 can be dangerous, not just for the drivers, but for everyone involved trackside. One risk that isn't often anticipated, though, is to be on the receiving end of a knockout-style punch from one of the drivers, as one marshal learned the hard way in Canada in 1977. As James Hunt couldn't finish the Canadian GP after a disappointing season overall, clearly wasn't in the mood to be touched, even if it was for safety reasons. But before he could even get his message across, Hunt had punched him square in the jaw. So much so that the marshal was reportedly bleeding and had to receive treatment afterwards.
Fameux crochet du droit pour Monsieur James Hunt. Incroyable, il a la tension nerveuse.
The 2015 Brazilian Grand Prix adds another chapter to Fernando Alonso's book of memorable Interlagos moments. As his underperforming McLaren once again decides to call it quits mid-session, Alonso refuses to let it dampen his spirits. Instead of the usual frustrated trudge back to the pits, the two-time world champion improvises. Spotting a conveniently placed folding chair trackside, Alonso makes an executive decision. While his competitors continue to lap the circuit, he casually settles in for a quick sunbathing session. There's Fernando, eyes closed, soaking in the Brazilian rays as if he's at a beach resort rather than a Grand Prix circuit. Unfortunately, the rest of the Spaniards' weekend wasn't so bright, finishing 15th and behind his teammate Jenson Button the next day.
I hope he's got some sun cream on. Don't try that at home unless you've got the factor 50.
At the first Hungarian Grand Prix since 1936, the largest ever crowd at an F1 race witnessed this awesome battle between two legends of the sport. 200,000 fans watched on as Piquet closed the gap into Senna, and having tried and failed the lap before, this time his ballsy move went down as one of the best in F1 history. Rumours even floated around that Piquet gave Senna the middle finger gesture as he drove past, but the camera quality makes it pretty difficult to see. When asked about it in an interview years later, Piquet didn't confirm nor deny the rumour, and so it lives on.
The Brazilian Grand Prix of 2003 is considered one of the wildest and most chaotic races in Formula 1 history. It included several crashes, but by far the two worst ones were courtesy of Mark Webber and Fernando Alonso. As it often does at the Interlagos track, the skies opened and the race instantly became a full wet race. Moments later, Mark Webber sent his Jaguar into the wall, causing a horrible crash. He suffered a huge impact and sent debris flying across the track, including 2 of his wheels with tires still attached. Fernando Alonso then rounded the corner at full speed and, unfortunately for him, had no time to react to the debris. He drove straight into one of Webber's loose wheels at around 160 miles per hour. It instantly snatched the car from Alonso's control and sent him straight into the tire barrier head first, causing a monumental crash for the Spaniard.
Oh, and we've got another car.
Alonso.
We think Alonso's come round and probably found
Race stopped.
Red flag. Race has stopped.
But
and it'll go back.
yes,
It'll go back
certainly.
one lap. So
Martin, I have to interrupt you because the Jordan team are bouncing up and down in the pit lane. We're looking at the images there of that incident of Alonso.
He was taken from the track on a stretcher, yet still managed to finish the race in 3rd position. Luckily, neither of the drivers were seriously injured in these truly shocking hits. First up is one of the most bizarre moments ever captured in Formula 1. It came down to the wire of Q3, the final session in qualifying for the 2019 Italian Grand Prix. Every driver was trying to squeeze in another flying lap to improve their qualifying. But one of the most ridiculous things ever was taking place instead. All the teams sent their drivers out too late. It dawned on them about halfway around the lap that they weren't going to make the checkered flag in time, so they all started to drive flat out, trying to overtake each other, creating a huge mess on the track. It turned out that the only driver to reach the checkered flag in time was McLaren's Carlos Sainz, who made it just in the nick of time, allowing him a chance to improve his qualifying.
There are 4 seconds, 3, 2, and 1, and I don't think they've made it.
Come on, guys.
They've not made it.
This made a scene where every driver was flying down the main straight with their DRS open at the same time. On the other hand, Sainz was left on his own to start his lap, while all the other drivers were left confused about what had taken place. The commentators' reactions added to the proof that this was one of the dumbest things that had ever happened.
Let's talk about Nelson Piquet, the guy who took hands-on racing to a whole new level. At the 1982 German Grand Prix at Hockenheim, Piquet led in his Brabham. He comes up to lap Eliseo Salazar in the ATS. Now, these two were actually buddies. Piquet had even helped Salazar get into F1 years before. Salazar sees Piquet coming and slows down to let him through. Simple enough, right? Wrong. Salazar completely misjudges his braking point, ploughing right into Piquet. Both cars are out, race over. Now you'd think Piquet might cut his friend some slack for an honest mistake, but nope, Piquet goes absolutely nuts. He jumps out of his car and charges at Salazar. Both guys still have their helmets on, but that doesn't stop Piquet. He starts throwing punches and kicks like he's in a kung fu movie. Here's Piquet leading a Grand Prix 1 minute, and the next he's trying to drop kick a fellow driver on live TV. This wasn't just road rage, it was track rage cranked up to 11. It showed that even friendship goes out the window when you're fighting for a win in F1.
Salazar just driving into him. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Quite what Salazar thought he was doing, and I have to say that is an absolute disgrace by Salazar.
The Brazilian and the Colombian driver, I couldn't help it, said, and take that. Oh my goodness.
The 1986 Monaco GP was the start of a new circuit layout in the Principality, and the drivers put it to good use in the race. When Jacques Lafitte stalled on the grid and got away dead last, he made up for his disastrous start with some fine overtaking moves as he pulled his way through the track until he reached Johansson and pulled off a beautiful move in the penultimate corner.
There's Johansson with Lafitte trying to take him as they go down to the Rascasse, but Johansson is on the inside line there, Lafitte driving round the outside.
The overtake was one of the best Monaco has seen, as Lafitte somehow managed to keep it out of the walls.
Now let's have a look at a crash that happened more recently, which quickly became one of the biggest talking points of the season. During qualifying for the 2022 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Mick Schumacher suffered one of the most painful-looking crashes in Formula 1 history. He was attempting to hustle his Haas VF22 into Q1 at the tricky Jeddah street track during F1's second visit to the newly constructed street track. Being the fastest street track in the world and with the concrete wall so close all lap round, one small mistake can be extremely costly. Suddenly, while on a flying lap, Schumacher lost control of his car on a curb. And out of nowhere, it snapped violently and threw him into the concrete wall at 170 miles per hour. The impact was so severe that one side of the car was completely destroyed, and Mick was unable to get out of the car for several minutes.
Oh, Otmar! We'll just leave it there as Mick Schumacher hits the wall. 2 tyres coming loose as he hit the wall as well, and that is the second red flag of this session.
He was taken into an ambulance to the medical center and escaped uninjured, but was unable to race the next day. That's what happens when your crash registers a force of over 60 Gs.
The 1994 season finale in Adelaide, Australia was the stuff of legends, or nightmares, depending on who you ask. Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill were locked in a fierce battle for their first world championship. Schumacher started on pole, with Hill right behind him in second. As the race unfolded, these two were in a league of their own, leaving the rest of the pack in their dust. But on lap 36, everything changed. Schumacher hit the wall on the right side of the street circuit, and a few corners later was caught up by his title rival. Hill, seeing an opportunity, went for an overtake. Schumacher, not one to back down, held his ground. What happened next is still debated to this day. The two cars collided, with Schumacher's Benetton slamming into the wall. For a split second, it looked like Schumacher had handed the title to Hill on a silver platter. But as Hill limped back to the pit, it became clear his Williams was too damaged to continue. Just like that, Schumacher clinched the world title by a single point. The aftermath was pure chaos. Hill's camp was fuming, accusing Schumacher of deliberately causing the crash to secure the championship. The paddock was buzzing with conspiracy theories and heated arguments. Schumacher, for his part, held his innocence, but the incident left a bitter taste in many mouths. It wasn't just about a racing incident anymore, it was about the integrity of the sport itself. This moment goes down as one of the most controversial in F1 history. It showed just how far some drivers might go to win.
Damon seeing him slow, Damon goes for the inside there, and now that really should have been, now look at that, Schumacher cuts across, rides over the wheels, the left rear wheel of Schumacher hits Damon's left front. That should have been Damon's corner, even disregarding anything else in my book.
This next moment is one of stupidity and heartbreak. During the 1991 Canadian Grand Prix, Nigel Mansell was heading comfortably towards a victory, but disaster struck on the very last lap for the Englishman. When he was approaching the hairpin, one of the final corners on the legendary street track, his car stopped abruptly on the track for no apparent reason. Mansell had a commanding lead and was way ahead of the competition. However, when he stopped just seconds before taking the checkered flag, all hopes of glory disappeared. Gearbox failure was the reason given by his Williams team for stopping on the track. However, some people think that it was Mansell's fault. Some say that he was distracted while waving to the fans and tucked the tight corner in 6th gear by mistake and stalled the car, while others say he hit a button in the cockpit to turn the car off. Either way, Mansell had no option but to watch his competitors overtake him. This shocking moment is regarded as one of the dumbest moments in the history of Formula 1.
On lap 43 in Singapore, Felipe Massa showed that if there's a gap, sometimes you just gotta lick the stamp and send it. The Brazilian had been following his compatriot closely, even if he were to take both of them out in the process.
This is now onto the Anderson Bridge, the Hungary-Road Bridge. There's Senna moving in front. Wow, what a piece of driving by Felipe Massa.
It was a pretty bold move, but Felipe took the risk and moved into 9th place.
This next crash is one of the worst ever in Formula 1. It came courtesy of Robert Kubica, who at the time was an extremely promising young driver who many expected to become a Formula 1 world champion one day. However, his career was derailed slightly in 2007 after this monumental crash at the Canadian Grand Prix. Driving for BMW Sauber, he was approaching one of the largest braking zones on the whole circuit when his car left the track at over 180 miles per hour and hit a concrete wall head first. It ripped the front off his car and fired him back across the track with the car on its side, straight into another concrete wall on the other side of the track. The front of his car was ripped off completely, and you could see Kubica's feet through the broken monocoque. Miraculously, he survived and even came back the next year and won the race to take his maiden F1 win. McLaren's Lando Norris was in his third year in the rising McLaren team, but had failed to score any victories due to his machinery not being fast enough. However, that all changed for the young Brit when he flew to Russia in 2021. The 2021 Russian Grand Prix turned into a race that will be remembered by fans, but that Norris will want to forget. And for good reason too. The main talking point was Lando Norris's unforgivable mistake. Norris was leading the race from start to finish and looked set for his first Formula 1 victory, but with just 5 laps to go, it began raining and he decided to stay on slick tyres. His main opponent in the race, Lewis Hamilton, pitted and changed to intermediate tyres, and it turned out to be the right decision, as 2 laps later, the heavens opened. Lando made a rookie error with his tyre choice, causing him to slide off the track and hit the barriers, handing the win to Hamilton.
I'm not that happy. I could have won the race and I didn't, so I'm never going to be happy like this. But yeah, it's the way it is. It's the way it went. We made the decisions. I made the decisions that I made, and they were obviously wrong in the end of the day. So yeah, tough one.
Right, let's rewind a bit on this Vettel-Webber drama. These two had been at each other's throats for years. In Istanbul 2010, they took each other out while fighting for the lead. Then there was Silverstone, where Webber dropped that zinger over the radio, not bad for a number 2 driver. Fast forward to Malaysia 2013, Vettel's on pole, but Webber snatches the lead early. They're cruising, looking set for a Team 1-2, but Vettel had other ideas. He suddenly dives down the inside on the main straight, Webber tries to squeeze him, but Vettel's not backing down. They're side by side into turn 1, neither giving an inch. Somehow, Vettel makes it stick around the outside of turn 4, gutsy move, but it lit a fire in the paddock. The podium was painful to watch. Webber looked ready to deck someone, while Vettel tried to play it cool and failed miserably.
So you were surprised when he came past you? Yeah, well, I turned my engine down and started cruising on the tyres, and then the fight was on. So anyway, we know he's a quick peddler, but I was disappointed with the outcome of today's race, and in the end, the team did a good job. I had some good fans here from Australia, so thanks guys. I did my best, and yeah.
Was this Vettel letting his emotions run wild, or payback for Brazil just 3 races earlier where Webber nearly cost him the title by squeezing him on the opening lap? We'll never know for sure. Either way, it was the last straw. Webber called it quits at season's end, probably counting down the days. This wasn't just about one race, it was years of tension boiling over.
Oh, Sebastian, you need to give him the space. Hold position. This is silly, Seb, come on.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, Mark, he was told.
Fresh off winning the 2005 World Championship the week before in Brazil, Fernando Alonso started the 2005 Japanese GP all the way back in P16. By the time he carved his way through the field and caught up with 7-time champion Schumacher on lap 19, Alonso pulled off one of the greatest moves F1 has ever seen at 130R.
Leave it's for Fisichella, the current leader, and then Michael goes to the inside, tries to block the line in 130R, and Alonso having none of it.
Alonso even claimed after the move that he knew Michael would pull the brakes because he had a wife and kids waiting for him at home.
In the history of Formula 1, there have been countless moments which leave fans opening their mouths in shock. However, only a few would match the absolute absurdity of Nick Heidfeld's collision with the medical car in the 2002 Brazilian Grand Prix. Heidfeld was behind the wheel of his Williams car, and the marshals were waving their yellow flags as another car had crashed. However, when Heidfeld rounded the corner of the accident, he was going far too fast and lost control of his car. Unable to avoid the medical car that was tending to the crashed car, Heidfeld drove straight into the medical car, completely smashing its door. Fortunately, the passenger hadn't gotten out of the medical car, as it could have been a whole lot worse. It remains one of the funniest and downright dumbest moments in F1 history.
The 2021 Imola Grand Prix gave us one of the most disrespectful moments in recent F1 history. Valtteri Bottas was in his Mercedes, going head-to-head with George Russell in a Williams. Now, these two weren't just racing for points, there was a whole lot more at stake. Rumours were flying that both drivers were gunning for that prized Mercedes seat the following season. And let's not forget, just 4 months earlier at the Sakir GP, Russell had shown up Bottas by outpacing him in the same car. So there they were, barreling down the main straight at Imola. Russell, feeling brave, made a move to the right, but he misjudged it big time. His tyre caught the grass and suddenly he's spinning, slamming right into Bottas. Both cars were completely finished. Race over for both of them.
On board with George Russell, who hits Bottas. Yes, because he gets onto the grass.
Now, here's where it gets really spicy. As the dust settled, Russell marched over to Bottas's wrecked car. You'd think he'd be checking if his rival was okay. Instead, he's greeted by Bottas giving him the middle finger. Russell's response was a smack on Bottas's helmet before storming off. Well, it turned out to be Bottas's last season at Mercedes. Russell ended up taking his seat the very next year to add insult to injury. This moment wasn't just about a crash, it was about two drivers, the pressure of competing for a top seat, and emotions boiling over in the worst possible way. Hamilton on Leclerc and Perez, Silverstone 2022. When Leclerc's team told him to stay out of the pits by his team during the safety car period, he found himself slipping down the pack and caught up to by Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton. Under pressure, Leclerc moved to defend himself from the cars behind, but left himself vulnerable to not just one but two cars attacking from behind.
Charles Leclerc gives him just enough space. Can Perez squeeze past? They're going wheel to wheel towards Vale now. Who's going to be last on the brakes? Leclerc has that inside line. Through goes Hamilton. Unbelievable stuff.
Hamilton's keen eye for overtaking chances paid off in a move that sealed a third-place podium finish for the British driver at his home race.
In the days before every moment of pre-season testing was recorded and streamed live, there would often be rumours or reports of drivers having big crashes that barely anyone saw. But in the 1990 pre-season test, this crash of Satoru Nakajima was one of the rare ones caught on camera. They were testing in Jerez and Nakajima's car broke in one of the worst sections of track. In the high-speed corner, his rear wing suddenly detached, and without giving him any chance of saving it, it spun around immediately. He was sent flying off the track backwards at full speed, doing a 360 through the gravel trap before smashing off the barrier extremely hard. The front suspension was destroyed, and the tyre barrier was busted open after this very dangerous accident.
Unfortunately, Nakajima had a nasty shock when a rear wing mounted collapsed.
Fernando Alonso takes over the camera. Picture this, it's the dying moments of free practice 2 at the 2016 Brazilian Grand Prix, and Fernando Alonso's McLaren has just given up the ghost, stranding him trackside. But does our Spanish maestro sulk? Oh no, instead he decides to turn this mechanical misfortune into an impromptu adventure. Abandoning his lifeless car, Alonso spots the nearby camera crew and thinks, why not? Grabbing the camera, Alonso starts framing shots like he's the next Spielberg. For a moment, it seems he's found his post-F1 calling, but reality soon hits. Perhaps he's better off sticking to racing his rivals than all this camera stuff. Laughing, he hands back the camera and heads for the pit, leaving us with an unforgettable slice of F1 comedy gold.
We see his handiwork.
I think he's having a go at something, yeah.
No,
absolutely rubbish.
Let's talk about one of the most gut-wrenching moments in recent F1 history, Daniel Ricciardo's pit stop disaster at the 2016 Monaco Grand Prix. This race had everything: wet conditions, strategy calls, and a massive communication error that cost Ricciardo a near certain victory. So the race is on a wet day in Monaco, with Ricciardo starting from pole. He gets off to a great start, pulling away from the Mercedes of Nico Rosberg, who's struggling for pace. Ricciardo's looking dominant, building up a 13-second lead. It's looking good for the Aussie. As the track starts to dry, teams start thinking about tyre strategy. Red Bull decided to pit Ricciardo for intermediate tyres. It seems like a smart move at the time, but it put him behind Lewis Hamilton, who stayed out on wet tyres. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Hamilton pits for ultra soft slicks, and Red Bull see their chance. They call Ricciardo in, planning to put him on super softs. The idea is that these tyres would last longer if they came out behind Hamilton. Smart thinking, right? Wrong. When Ricciardo pulls into the pits, his tyres aren't ready. The team is scrambling, and Ricciardo's just sitting there, watching precious seconds tick away. It turns out there was a miscommunication between the pit wall and the garage. The right tyres were at the back of the garage, and they couldn't get them to the car in time. The pit stop took about 10 seconds longer than it should have. When Ricciardo finally exits the pits, he finds himself side by side with Hamilton. For the rest of the race, Ricciardo threw everything he had at Hamilton. Each lap was a desperate attempt to undo the pit stop disaster. But Monaco is unforgiving, and despite coming tantalizingly close at the chicane, the win slipped through his fingers. After the race, the pain in Ricciardo's voice was unmistakable. "Save it," he told his team on the cool-down lap. "There's nothing you guys can say that will make it any better." On the podium, his usual radiant smile was replaced by a look of utter devastation. This wasn't just a lost race, it was a dream shattered. This heart-wrenching moment became a turning point in Ricciardo's career. The trust between driver and team, so crucial in F1, had been severely tested. It was one of the key moments that would eventually lead to his surprising departure from Red Bull, showing how a single pit stop error could not only cost a race win, but potentially alter the course of a driver's career. As Ricciardo left Monaco that day, the weight of what could have been hung heavy on his shoulders.
They haven't got the tyres ready. The tyres aren't ready.
Max Verstappen's first F1 win was pure mayhem. At 18, he'd just been catapulted into the Red Bull seat from Toro Rosso. The 2016 Spanish Grand Prix kicked off with drama. Both Mercedes cars wiped out, leaving Max suddenly in the lead. For 60 grueling laps, he fended off a relentless Kimi Raikkonen. Max's tyres were shot, his legs cramping from the pressure. He counted down each agonizing lap, driving on what felt like ice. In the pits, his dad's nose was bleeding from the sheer stress.
Yes! Yes! Unbelievable, Max. Unbelievable.
Crossing the finish line, he clinched more than just a race win. He became F1's youngest victor ever, transforming from a kid without a driver's license to an F1 champion in less than a year. It wasn't just a lucky day, it was raw talent announcing itself to the world. Max Verstappen had arrived, and F1 would never be the same. The 2006 Monaco Grand Prix takes an unexpected turn when Kimi Raikkonen's McLaren gives up midway through the race. But the Iceman isn't about to let a mechanical failure ruin his day in the Principality. Instead of heading back to the paddock for the usual post-retirement analysis, Raikkonen decides to make the most of his early exit. Without hesitation, he sets off towards the harbour where his luxury yacht awaits. As his competitors continue to navigate the challenging streets of Monaco, Raikkonen trades the cockpit for the deck. While race engineers puzzle over telemetry data, he's relaxing with friends, the sound of engines replaced by gentle waves. This detour perfectly encapsulates Raikkonen's unique approach to Formula One. It's a moment that becomes instant paddock legend, showcasing his ability to remain unfazed by the sport's highs and lows.
There is Kimi Raikkonen. He's not even gone back to the paddock. He's got his shirt off. He's on his boat, which has a splendid name, One More Toy.
The iconic Spa-Francorchamps circuit, 2002 Belgian Grand Prix qualifying. Under 10 minutes left and Juan Pablo Montoya is chasing Schumacher's time, but someone else is on the Williams driver's mind, McLaren's Kimi Raikkonen. The Iceman has clearly gotten under Montoya's skin.
Raikkonen, what a f***ing idiot!
His anger echoing through the cockpit, and emotions are running high as the championship contenders battle for pole position. Lewis Hamilton's debut at the 2007 Australian Grand Prix was the beginning of his long streak of podium wins as a rookie. From the start of the race, everyone was shocked to see how composed Hamilton was, but what nobody knew was that he was going to mark his name in his debut race with a show of class.
Go! Nice start by both the McLarens. Look at Kubica attacking Hamilton. We've got yellow flags at the back. Hamilton's had some manners put on him by Kubica, but he comes round the outside. He's also got round Alonso. Stunning start by Lewis Hamilton.
Throughout the race, Hamilton's performance remained ecstatic, but it was in the final lap that he put the whole world in awe. He ended the race in P3, taking home a podium as a rookie in his very first F1 race.
10 pistettä ja voittajan pokaali.
This debut race marked the beginning of perhaps the most amazing season that a rookie has ever had in F1 history. The 1995 Hungarian Grand Prix provides an unforgettable moment of F1 comedy, courtesy of Taki Inui. After retiring from the race, Inui's day goes from bad to worse in a series of comical missteps. Parking his stricken car trackside, Inui spots smoke and decides to play hero. He grabs a fire extinguisher, ready to save the day, but in his haste, he forgets his first rule of track safety: always look both ways. As Inui dashes towards his car, the medical vehicle, ironically there to help, becomes an unwitting assailant. In a moment of perfect comedic timing, it clips the unsuspecting driver, sending him sprawling across the track in an ungraceful tumble. The sight of Inui, fire extinguisher in hand, being upended by the very car meant to assist him becomes an instant classic in F1's blooper reel. Fortunately, Inui emerges unscathed, left only with a bruised ego and a cautionary tale about the perils of track crossing enthusiasm.
Oh goodness gracious me, now that's absolutely appalling.
Chaos erupted at the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix as Michael Schumacher's championship hopes hung in the balance. The German, trailing in the standings, needed a strong result at the rain-soaked circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Schumacher, leading comfortably after a restart, was approaching David Coulthard to lap the McLaren driver when disaster struck. The Ferrari slammed into the back of Coulthard's car, ripping off its front right wheel and leaving Schumacher incensed.
Coulthard in these appalling conditions. Oh God! Michael Schumacher hits David Coulthard and is out of the Belgian Grand Prix.
The normally composed champion stormed into the McLaren garage, his face contorted with rage as he confronted Coulthard.
Look at him, he's saying, I'm going to the stewards, James, can you enlighten, he's going to Coulthard, he's going to have it out with David Coulthard.
Even in a tense clear-the-air meeting later, Schumacher refused to accept any blame, insisting he was never wrong. The incident showcased the fierce competitiveness that defined Schumacher's career, his unwavering determination sometimes boiling over in the heat of battle. Brazil 2016 was when Max really shut the haters up. Interlagos is tough enough when it's dry, but that day it was like driving in a water park. Max started off strong, getting past Rosberg for P2, but then Red Bull gambled on intermediates and it didn't work out. He had to pit again for wets, dropping him to 14th. That's when the real show started. He started carving through the field like everyone else was standing still. The way he was finding grip was unreal, taking lines no one else even thought of trying. Two moves really stood out, one on Vettel and another on Perez near the end. He was carrying so much more speed than anyone else, it was like he was driving a different car. But the moment everyone remembers, that save. He nearly lost it completely, looked like he was headed straight for the wall, somehow he caught it, a few centimeters either way, and would be telling a different story. He ended up P3 behind the Mercedes guys, but the way he got there, that's what had everyone talking. It wasn't just fast, it was smart, gutsy driving. That day, Max proved he wasn't just quick, he was the real deal.
Come on lad, you can do it, he's done it, there you go.
And the crowd are cheering like crazy underneath us.
Even Martin Brundle, former F1 driver and commentator, called it one of the greatest drives I've ever seen in Formula 1. Fernando Alonso's fury echoed through the team radio during his Italian Grand Prix battle with Jolyon Palmer.
What a joke! The 5 seconds. What a joke!
The Spaniard's sarcasm reached new heights post-race. The stewards must have been having a Heineken instead of watching, he quipped, referencing an F1 beer sponsor. Alonso demanded consistency. If grabbing the ball with your hands is a penalty in football, it should always be a penalty.
What Palmer is doing? He needs to give me back the position. Got the chicane.
Stuck behind Palmer for laps, Alonso suffered gearbox damage. Despite fighting for meager positions, he insisted, spectators want to see normal racing, not a party. A clear jab at his rival's controversial defensive tactics.
Where is Palmer?
And Fernando Palmer has retired.
Palmer.
Schumacher's F1 debut at Spa 91 was something else. That weekend marked the arrival of a legend, even if it ended early. In his first F1 qualifying, he put that Jordan in 7th, outqualified his experienced teammate De Cesaris by almost 8/10 in a car he barely knew at a track he'd never seen. Spa wasn't kind to rookies. Its high-speed corners and weird weather chewed them up, but Michael drove it like he'd been racing there for years, finding speed nobody expected. The race ended almost instantly with a clutch failure, but those few laps were enough. The paddock knew something special had just arrived in F1. Benetton signed him immediately, and the rest is racing history.
You must be very happy with your results.
Yeah, sure, I'm really happy. The car feels really good and it makes a lot of fun to drive, and also for the time, I'm really happy. Yeah.
In his debut year, Hamilton moved on to make history over and over again with his insane performances. However, one of the most significant moments of the entire season was when he recorded his first ever F1 victory and pole position. At the Canadian Grand Prix, Hamilton proved that he was one of the greatest rookie racers ever to step foot on a circuit. Leaving behind Heidfeld and Alonso, Hamilton took the lead and achieved a milestone that many rookies have only dreamt of.
Well, he's rewriting the book of what is possible in Formula One. If he can do this after 6 races, what might he achieve in the future?
Good guys, well done!
Vettel Kvyat, China 2016. Sebastian Vettel stormed into the driver's room, his face flushed with anger after a dramatic collision with his teammate Kimi Raikkonen, courtesy of Danny Kvyat's daring overtake. The German wasted no time confronting the young Russian, his frustration and disbelief evident in every word. Kvyat, on the other hand, seemed more amused than apologetic.
Well, it's racing.
I'm racing, but you know, if I keep going the same line, you'll crash.
Don't keep going.
This only served to further infuriate Vettel, who argued that Kvyat's reckless driving could have easily ended in disaster.
We'll crash if you do like that.
But we didn't. So.
Yeah, you didn't.
The Russian shrugged off Vettel's accusations, cheekily pointing out that they didn't actually crash.
I will keep on risking like this, and everyone should expect that.
The tension between the two was palpable, but as they later shared the podium champagne, it seemed the rift had somewhat healed for now. Schumacher's qualifying lap at Monaco 2012 was just insane. Everyone had pretty much counted him out, but the German showed up and absolutely nailed it when it counted. He was literally inches from the walls, dancing that Mercedes through the corners like it was nothing. The onboard footage is wild, working that steering wheel like crazy, making split-second adjustments you'd miss if you blinked. His footwork was next level, perfectly controlling the throttle to keep the back end in check. Near the end of the lap, he threw his crazy flick with the wheel, the car visibly pivoting around. Didn't even think about lifting off the throttle, just trusted his skills. Then he absolutely sent it through the swimming pool section and boom, fastest time. The place just went nuts, everyone on their feet for an absolutely epic lap from one of the greatest ever. Sure, the penalty later was a total buzzkill, but that lap, prime Schumacher qualifying, showing everyone he still had that special something.
What a little start. Pole position. Well done, Michael. Fantastic.
Daniel Ricciardo's frustration reached a boiling point after a catastrophic Japanese Grand Prix qualifying session. The normally affable Aussie saw his hopes of ending a 10-race podium drought evaporate when a throttle actuator failure left him stranded in Q2, relegating him to a dismal 15th on the grid. "I'm frustrated and fed up, but I won't let it get the best of me," Ricciardo sighed, his trademark smile notably absent. As he walked away from his stricken Red Bull, Ricciardo's anguished screams into his helmet said it all. "I just can't catch a break," he roared to Sky F1.
There's absolutely nothing he could do today. Exactly.
The 1996 drivers were getting ready for their first Grand Prix of the year at the Albert Park circuit, which was also F1's first time visiting this track. But for Martin Brundle, this excitement was short-lived after this monster crash at turn 3. He drove into the back of another car and his Jordan Peugeot got launched dramatically into the air. He flew over a McLaren and flipped upside down immediately. The Jordan slid into the gravel trap on its rollover hoop and dug into the ground in a very nasty crash. The car literally split in two and folded over on top of itself, showing just how fragile these cars really were.
Wow, that's one of the Jordans! This is what we feared at this corner, and that looks very nasty indeed.
In the pulse racing world of F1, it's all about speed, technique, and nerves made of steel, which, every now and then, is reduced to fortuitous moments changing the course of history. In some ways, the 2008 Brazilian F1 Grand Prix was an occasion like no other, a Grand Prix that played out with such incredible highs and lows that fans could only watch on in amazement. Lewis Hamilton, the British wonder kid, had to finish the race no lower than 5th in a monsoon at Interlagos if he wanted to win the championship in only his second year in F1. As the race developed, the skies cracked open and the rain fell upon the Interlagos track. His title rival, Ferrari's Felipe Massa, looked as though he had everything wrapped up. He was leading in the race, with only a handful of laps remaining between him and the prize, that elusive title of a Brazilian world champion, for the first time since Ayrton Senna in 1991.
He has done everything he needed to do, and we wait now to find out who will be the world champion.
But fate had other plans. Suddenly, as if in a movie script, the unthinkable happened. Toyota's Timo Glock, who was running 5th in the race and just 1 position ahead of Hamilton, stayed out after deciding against pitting for wet tyres in the final laps. The track, now increasingly more difficult to drive on, was too wet for Glock, and on the final corner of the final lap, he lost control. In an astonishing twist with just seconds remaining, Hamilton darted past Glock into the last corner and claimed 5th position.
Is that Glock? Is that Glock going slowly?
It is, it's Glock! Oh my goodness me! Hamilton's back in position again!
McLaren's pit wall exploded with euphoria and Hamilton's fans erupted in joy. This race saw an extraordinary stroke of luck, which worked in Hamilton's favour. He won the 2008 F1 World title by a single point, a dream come true for the young Brit. The 2008 Brazilian Grand Prix will always be a reminder of how luck can dictate fate in F1. At the stunning Circuito Permanente de Jerez, under the baking sun of the 1997 European Grand Prix, destiny, talent, and pure chance came together in the most extraordinary racing events ever seen. In a qualifying session for the ages, a Hollywood-like script unfolded before everyone's eyes. In Jerez's merciless turns and curves, there could be no errors, and the smallest margins would make the difference. However, at the event's climax, an incredible moment of pure luck occurred, which later would become one of the wildest things to happen in the history of the series. In the final moments of qualifying, up came 3 of the greatest F1 drivers at the time. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, his teammate and charisma in motion Jacques Villeneuve, and Michael Schumacher. As the clock ticked down, they each finished their flying laps, but when they had finished, something unprecedented had occurred. Looking at the timing screens revealed something incredible. These 3 giants astonishingly set the exact same lap times, to the millisecond.
This is amazing! I cannot believe this! Heinz-Harald Frentzen has done exactly the same time.
One of those bizarre moments of ridiculous odds that left watchers scratching their heads. It allowed them to be even on the final scoring sheets, something so unique that it left some people running to the rulebook to check what would happen next. In this situation, the driver who set the lap time first would be credited with the highest position. So, as Jacques Villeneuve finished his lap just seconds before the other 2 drivers, he was given pole position, with Schumacher qualifying second and Frentzen in third. The pure luck in Villeneuve leaving the pit lane moments before his competitors was the difference in qualifying on pole or in third position. This qualifying session was a reminder that even within the high-speed stakes of F1, where every millimeter counts and there is a rule that governs almost everything, things can still get magical and luck can still play a huge role.